I'll start and okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the part 4 of the training in the new RPA, and we have gracious to have Michelle to teach us. It's a small group, but it's okay. I mean, maybe some of the agents feel that they have already used the RPA and they don't need that much that training anymore. But for the benefit of who wants to learn more, I encourage them and I welcome them to this meeting. So Michelle, without further ado, well, anyway, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, everybody. So just so that there's no background noise, if you don't mind, I'm going to mute all. If you have questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask. So I'm going to mute everybody now so we can begin the training. Okay, thank you. But that doesn't mute me, right?
No.
Okay. So how do I get rid of this so I can minimize? Okay. All right. So welcome to session 4 of the RPA training. So we are at the end of this training event, and let's get started. So we're going to start on the bottom of page 12. So definitions and instructions. When you see a letter in the contracts that's capitalized, it's usually a defined word in paragraph 25. So we're going to go over briefly just a few of them. So acceptance on number A means that the offer or the final counteroffer is fully executed in writing, all parties have signed, and it's been delivered to the other party or that party's authorized agent. So that's, we know most of this stuff, but there are a few new things. So let's just move along here. Agent means a broker, salesperson associated and licensed under the brokerage firm as identified in paragraph 2B. 2B is your agency confirmation section. It's a very important section to make sure that you've typed everything right. License numbers, agent names, brokerages. So the agreement is all counteroffers and any addenda or amendments that pertain to the contract will form the binding agreement once all of them are signed and delivered to the parties. So the contract, just as a reminder, and they even define it back here, this is an as-is contract. So what does as-is mean? It means the property in its current present condition. However, the seller still needs to disclose known material facts and defects and provide the statutory disclosures that are required. Now, within the contingency period, the buyer can request that the seller make repairs or take any other corrective action, but the seller is not required to make any repairs unless it was agreed to in writing. Usually that agreement comes on the RR, and then the response for the seller is RRR. Okay. So the authorized agent is the agent, individual, licensee that's specified in the real estate broker section, which is the page 16, the last page of the contract. So we want to make sure we're filling all that information out. So CarForm, I don't know if you've ever had this happen where somebody's delivered a disclosure or a contract on an old version. Here it defines CarForm as the most current version. So sometimes you'll have an agent call you and say, we need this on the most current version. If you're not sure, we have a zip forms, and that's very updated all the time. So if you're not sure if you're on the most current form, ask the office or go into the zip forms and take a look at that. So close of escrow, we know what that means. The grant deed has been signed off. It's going to be recorded. Copy for this contract means photocopy. You can fax it, which most of us don't, or delivered by electronic means such as email. So I has a new term and a couple of new terms. So we're going to take a little bit to go over this again. We went over it previously in our training, but counting days. So the first day, day 0, is after the event. So day 0 would be when all parties sign the contract and accepted the contract. That is day 0. So the next calendar day is when you would begin your count, okay, of days if you're counting for your contingency days. So we're going to drop right here to section 3. Remember, all calendar days are counted in determining the date in which performance must be completed. And that ends at 11:59 p.m. on the last day of that contingency or for performance. So this contract refers to that as the scheduled performance day. So remember that the scheduled performance day cannot land on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. It will move to the next day, which is not a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, and that will be called the allowable performance day. And again, they're reminding you it ends at 11:59 p.m. Now, if you needed to deliver a 2-day notice to perform, you would use your scheduled performance day date, and you can deliver that notice. But again, if that notice falls on Saturday, Sunday, or a legal holiday, the performance day moves to the next day, which is not a legal holiday, Saturday or Sunday. Okay, so that's something new in the contract. I think it makes it pretty clear with the scheduled performance day versus allowable performance day. And just remember, it always ends your contingency at 11:59 p.m. Day or days means calendar days. They want to remind you there's one exception. However, the delivery of the deposit to escrow, that's based on business days, okay? Business days. So delivery, delivered, or deliver. So there's a section in the last page of the contract that CAR has made a lot more clear. So you're going to have your addresses back there on how you prefer to be delivered to as the representing agent. Now they have added something in here, links, how we receive some of the disclosures and links. And I've had this happen where the other party thinks they delivered it, can't get it open, can't download it. So that can become an issue. So if you receive a link or something like that delivered to you at your delivery address, then within 3 days of receiving that link, you can let the other party know via the RFR, which is receipt for reports. So if you don't mind, I'm going to jump into that form real quick because I think it's important for us to take a look at it. So we're going to get into the RFR quickly so you can see what that looks like for you. Okay, so it's called the receipt for reports. Let's pull that up. So this is actually a nice document if you've never used it. So here you can list all of the disclosures that you've delivered. You check the box. If it was linked, you check here, prepared by and date. I like this form a lot because I think it proves that we've delivered it and the buyer needs to sign it. Has blank boxes for other things like maybe a city compliance report, things of that nature that you're delivering, and more blank boxes to fill in forms you've delivered. Now, right here is that what I was talking about. If you get a link, you can't open it, or the buyers don't like it, they just don't want a link, and you want it the disclosure delivered in a different manner. For all reports identified, paragraph 6 below, buyer is unable or unwilling to open the link and is unable to download the documents in the link and prefers to receive the documents directly than via a link. So you can either check the box that says all reports, you want everything resent that was delivered in a link, or maybe there's only a couple of disclosures that they delivered via link. So you check those, whatever applies to your transaction, and type in the report number. So if you get a delivery in a link that you don't like, just execute on this form, send it over to the buyer's agent, have the buyer sign it, and they will deliver the report to you in another manner other than a link. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the contract and I will open it up to full screen. Let me get down to the page first. Okay, so I'm going to go, oh, it's going to take me back up to the top. Excuse me, I should have done that first. Okay, let me just get down there. Okay. All right, here we are. Okay, so electronic copy, we can deliver it by email. There is a box in the back that's going to tell us how we want that delivered, and we can accept electronic signature. The law is pretty self-explanatory. Legally authorized signer means an individual who has the authority to sign as the principal, like if this is an LLC or corporation. And when we get to the back page, you'll see how they made it a lot easier for us to obtain an RCSD right in this contract. So we'll go over that a little bit further on page 16. Here, otherwise agreed. They're reminding you again that there's no verbal in our real estate contracts. Everything must be agreed to and signed by all parties and delivered. That agreement must be delivered. So it needs to be in writing. So repairs, any repairs, and here you note that they put including pest control, alterations, replacements under this agreement. So repairs, they've said that it includes pest control. So I know a lot of people have a question on that, but I've seen a lot of termite requests of late coming through on the RR from the buyer. So sign or signed means that they can sign with a pen, but most likely we're going to have an electronic signature on the original document. So that's perfectly acceptable. I know that in escrow, sometimes they want what we call wet signatures. Those are originals on their documents. So a lot of times when your parties go into escrow, they'll be getting original signatures, even if they've already signed the escrow instructions. So once you communicate acceptance and deliver that acceptance, you are in a legally binding contract, but the seller has the right to continue to offer the property for sale and to accept an offer, a backup offer, put it on the market for backup offer. And anytime prior to the communication of acceptance by the other party, delivering that signature, the buyer still has a right to entertain and perhaps accept another offer if the other party has not come back in time. So time is of the essence on the contract. Even though the contingencies are removed via writing, they're not an automatic removal. We still want to keep up with our timelines. Both agents should be watching those and adhering to those days. If there's any issue that comes up, make sure that you're putting it in writing if you need an extension of a timeline or a contingency, because everything needs to be in writing. So don't just assume it's okay, even if the seller's agent hasn't noticed to perform you or addressed it with you. Stay ahead of that curve and go ahead and get the request in for the extension of that contingency. So the legal authorized signer, we'll go over that more on the back page. So they've incorporated the RCSD into this agreement, which makes it really nice for us. So on page 16, we'll go over that a little bit more. So number 29, liquidated damages. So this particular box is not mandatory, but most deals, the seller and the buyer are going to sign it. But again, it's up to the parties. So let's take a look at what it's saying here. if a buyer fails to complete this purchase because of the buyer default, seller shall retain as liquidated damages the deposit actually paid. If a property is a dwelling with no more than 4 units, one of which the buyer intends to occupy, then the amount retained shall be no more than 3% of the purchase price, and the excess shall be returned to the buyer, the excess in excess of 3%. So release of funds, as we all know, requires mutual agreement and signed by all parties. So if you're representing an investor for 1 to 4 units and they have checked the box, they're not going to intend to occupy this property, liquidated damages could be higher, but so let's say your investor put in 4% instead of 3% and they defaulted, the seller may try to go after the full 4% if they're an investor and they're not occupying the property. But for residential occupants and everybody's initialed this box, it's 3% is the maximum for liquidated damages. And just a reminder, this is a voluntary box for the parties to sign here, and Peter can go into it more extensively, but we do recommend that the seller signs this. And the reason why is because the money's already in escrow, and it may be more difficult if you don't have the liquidated damages initialed and you have capped yourself at 3%, but at least that's easier to get than going to court and perhaps hiring an attorney and all of that. Okay, so I'm going to move on to mediation. And there's one important part in this. So right here, well, it's all important, but it's the same as the other, but mediation provision applies whether or not the parties have initialed the arbitration provision, and that's required by California law. So this mediation clause still applies whether or not they've initialed paragraph 31, the arbitration of disputes. So I want to point out something that is new in this paragraph. Most of this is the same with the exception right here. So what does that mean? If the buyer's agent has an arbitration provider or service provider that they prefer, they're going to insert this here at the time of the offer. So listing agents, make sure when you are reviewing your offers, take a quick look at paragraph 31 and make sure that's either blank, or if they've inserted an arbitration provider or service, that it's agreeable to your party. The reason the car attorneys inserted this here is because they were finding that parties were having a hard time agreeing on which service provider or arbitration provider to utilize. So listing agents, make sure you're checking here. Excuse me. If there's something filled in and you disagree, go ahead and counter that out. So let's look at some of the exclusions of arbitration clause. The following matters are excluded not only from arbitration, but mediation. So any matter that is within the jurisdiction of probate, small claims, or bankruptcy court. Now, small claims matters are up to $10,000 for a sole proprietor or individual. For corporations or entities, it's $5,000, okay, is the limitation. So those are just a couple of things here. I wanted to make sure to advise you to check this box. And if you're receiving an offer, make sure it's blank or that you agree with who they've selected, because that would be the arbitrator if you let that go through without countering it. So here's what I was talking about. So here's the buyer's offer. So if you check this is like the RCSD. Now the form still exists, but they've made it very easy. If it's an entity buyer, we can check this box and fill in the data here that's required, and then we don't have to do that extra form on this offer. So we can go ahead and check the box for entity buyers, fill it in, and as you all know that later in escrow, the escrow officer is going to ask for some proof, like a copy of the trust or things of that nature, so that they can make sure that that entity buyer is indeed authorized on this transaction. And C is really nice for us, this paragraph, because the RPA has 16 pages and the buyer is acknowledging receipt of all 16 pages and that they read and understand every page and all of the attachments that make up this agreement. So that's a nice section there for buyer's agents. The buyer will sign here. This is pretty standard. Now, acceptance. This is for the seller, the acceptance of the offer. So don't forget, agents, if you are counter offering, make sure you're clicking this box. Don't forget that. Or if it's a backup, click that. It's going to add another form, as you see up here. But go ahead and click whichever one applies, or maybe you're just accepting it. Now, if you're an entity seller that owns the property, again, you can check this entity seller, go ahead and fill out the representation capacity disclosure. That will alleviate you from having to connect the other form to this offer. So again, on C, which is nice, it's saying this RPA has 16 pages, and now the seller is acknowledging receipt and that they have read and understand every page and all attachments that make up this agreement. So that's very nice for all of us, that those are there for both the buyer and seller. So coming down here, we're in such a multiple counter offer business right now. Houses are getting many offers. So if you receive offers and the seller does not want to counter them or respond for your own file and your own sake, please have the seller initial here and date it. The reason why is if you're challenged, oh, you didn't present my offer, which happens a lot in this business. People will make those accusations. So the best way to protect yourself is to go ahead and have the seller initial just be in that habit and the date that they did not accept that offer. And all offers that were not accepted or rejected, remember, the DRE requires that we hold on to those offers for up to 3 years. So please make sure that you're doing that. And if you're not sure where to store them or how to do that, you can talk to our transaction coordinator, or I will help you. We can store those electronically, but please make sure that any non-accepted offers or rejected offers, that you're storing them for up to 3 years per the DRE requirement. So this is nice here, how they've added some real estate broker section. They've added it to make it easier for us. So here it's the same. We fill out our brokerage, make sure our license numbers are correct, make sure we're signing it. There's more than one agent. You're going to click the box here. Now, this is the designated electronic delivery address. This is a new section. So this will normally auto-populate with the email on the system for you. So your email will auto-populate. We don't recommend that you use a text number for electronic delivery address. It's very hard to see documents on a text. So here I would type in NA and not provide that, because I want an email. Now, if this populated with an email that I have on the system, but I don't prefer to use it, I'm going to check this box and put in the email that I want the disclosures and all communication to ride through. So I would check that box, put in that address, and now the deliveries need to be made to this alternate designated electronic delivery address only. So this would still be here, your normal email, but if you want it to go somewhere else, or you've made up a special email for that transaction, go ahead and check the box and insert it here. So please make sure that you're filling this out correctly, because once they send it to your email, your designated electronic delivery address, it's considered delivered. So you want to make sure that you have the right email here. Check all that, make sure it's right. Please put NA on the text, or just leave it blank, because we don't really want to get disclosures on a text message. So for the seller's brokerage firm, it's the same down here. You're going to fill out your brokerage, their license number, your name, license number, sign and date it. Down here, you have the same opportunity to put in an alternate email if you don't want your regular email used. I would suggest no text messages. So this is a really nice section. Just make sure the emails are filled out properly. They've made it really easy for us to designate where we want the documents delivered to, our correspondence pertaining to our transaction. So come down here, we're at the escrow holder acknowledgement. This will be filled out by escrow, and it is required, excuse me, for our files, and we also add this into our SkySlope documentation. So escrow will return this to you. It won't be obviously completed prior. Once you open escrow, escrow will fill this out and return it back to you. The presentation of offer, we're probably not going to really be using this much, because if you know, if they're the ones in escrow, yes, we presented it, but make sure you use the other one. If you did not elect to counter, the seller did not elect to counter, make sure that that is filled out. So that's the end of session 4 contract, but I want to go over a couple of other forms while we're all here together and show you some nice changes on. Okay, let me go into, let's see. I'm going to go into the seller counter offer, and this will also display on the multiple counter offer. So if you look at the seller counter offer, this section D is new, so and it will also appear on seller multiple counter offer number 1 or 2 or whatever, but check the boxes that apply to your transaction. And you can see they have a space for the addendum, backup offer addendum. So this is really nice that you can just check this box, or you put here, you know, city compliance report. So this is nice. It makes it easiest for us to check these boxes. There may be some documents that you want to get out of the way right away. You want to show the other party so that they have time to digest it. So you would just attach it here. If it's something like a compliance report that you want to show them you have it, or show them what the city is noting, go ahead and attach that. And you have all the opportunity. The TOPA forms here, so important. If a tenant is on the property, even if they're paying rent or not, please make sure you're attaching the TOPA form. So I want to show you something. I'm going to minimize out of this screen on the MLS. Let me go in. Okay, so I'm sure you've all seen this, but I just think it's so neat. So 1200 Oakwood Drive, this is Shumakeham's listing, but I'm going to be there on the weekend, let's say, doing an open house, and I'm not really great at making flyers. I don't feel comfortable with that. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to hit the print button. I'm going to have it open to the appropriate address. I'm going to hit print. So what the MLS has done, which I love, is look at this. They've added a flyer for us. So custom flyer with 3 photos. I'm going to print to PDF. It's going to give me, it's going to generate a flyer. So if you're trying to do a open house and you're sitting on it for another agent, go ahead and generate one of these flyers. If you're not super techie and don't feel comfortable making your own flyer, so you can generate that with the click of a button. It is so quick. So let me show you another one, customer flyer with photo and map. So see, now this will put a map of where the property is located. So they've made it so simple for us. So if you're going to sit an open house for another agent, go ahead and make sure that you're clicking on this and get your single page flyer. It'll make life easier for you if you're not super techie, as I'm not. So I like to find ways to do things, you know, that make it easier for all of us. So I'm going to go ahead and check the chat box for any questions. And then after that, I'm going to, okay. So there's no questions in the chat box, so I'm going to send it back to Peter Kemp so he can
Hi.
make any additional comments.
Thank you, Michelle. There's two comments that I want to make. One is about the liquidated damage that
Okay.
that Michelle mentioned. Now, as I said, the liquidated damage box is not mandatory, but it's strongly recommended, especially for the seller, because this is something that in the breach of contract you have to prove the damages, either the actual damage or incidental damage, and if you choose the liquidated damage, that means you don't know for sure what the damages are, and then the parties to the contract will agree to a certain amount as the stipulated the amount for damages. So it is pre-approved or agreed that this is what the liquidated damage is going to be. Now, for our residential properties, 1 to 4 units, the liquidated damage is by statute limited to 3% of the purchase price. So you cannot exceed 3% unless you're dealing with commercial real estate, unless you're dealing with something that that you particularly agree on, which is then outside the 1 to 4 units. But you don't have to agree to it. If you don't agree to it, then you are entitled to what we call the actual damages. In other words, if you can prove that you have sustained the damage that a certain amount, and even if it's more than 3%, you're entitled to the actual damages. But sometimes it's hard to prove, and even if you can prove it, you have to go to court and enforce your actual damages. And by the time you try to enforce it, the other party may be gone already, or they may declare bankruptcy. And so if you choose the liquidated damage, at least the money is in the escrow. Although it's not automatically that the escrow will give you the money when the buyer breached the contract, but at least you have the money there. And then if you go to court, there's a good chance that that you can get the liquidated damage money. So it is strongly recommended for buyers, for the sellers to check the liquidated damage. But again, the buyer doesn't have to agree to it. And so there's a pros and cons to it. So you just have to see what situation that fits you best. Okay. Now, the other issues that I want to mention is the mediation. Now, mediation is always voluntary. It's not mandatory. So even if you go into the mediation, if you don't like it, if you don't like the outcome of the mediation, you can change it anytime. Even though you agree to the arbitration, that doesn't mean that you have to agree to the mediation. But usually the mediation is the first step before the arbitration, because it is recommended, it's strongly encouraged by law or by the all parties, because mediation is something that each party can be put it under control by themselves. It doesn't have to give somebody the authority to determine the outcome. Like if you go to court, then the judge will decide what the outcome is. And if you go to arbitration, the arbitrator will determine the outcome is. But if you go just mediation, then each party will have full control of their outcome. If you don't want to agree to the mediation, you don't have to, and it's not binding on the parties, unless you sign an agreement after the mediation. Okay, so that's all I have to comment. If you have any questions for Michelle and I, then you're welcome to ask us now. Michelle, back to you.
Yep. So if there's any questions, go ahead and unmute yourself, or you have comments, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask them. And if there's any forms, we've already discussed the transfer disclosure and the fire hardening forms. If there's any other forms that you feel that we should do a heavier training on, we do have those two on our radar. If there's some other forms where you feel like you need more clarity on how to fill them out, please put them in the chat box and we'll pull that into the training. And also remember that all of these sessions have been recorded. So if you missed any of the prior 3 and you would like copies of those links sent to your email, please go ahead and put your email in the chat box and we'll make sure those get out to you today. So if there's no other questions, please unmute yourself. Everybody's muted, so if you want to talk, go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
A couple questions. I haven't written a contract yet since Cesar left, and I didn't know the new license number now for the broker to use. And I saw what you just posted right now when you were going over the forms, and I saw the 011-21690. Is that the new number?
That's always the number, Sylvia.
That's the same number.
We-
Okay.
regardless of whether Caesar is here or not, that's always
Okay.
the number that you should use. This is the corporate number for
Gotcha.
Banker George Realty.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
always the number that you
And
should.
yeah, okay, she answered my question earlier when going over the other contracts that the other recordings that that I
Yeah.
haven't seen yet.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
And Christine has a question in the chat box, Peter, and she wants to know, will there be training on a commercial contract?
Yeah, we can do that. We can have a training on that. That's no problem.
Okay.
Mhm.
Does
We'll arrange your time.
does anybody else have any questions? Unmute yourself and go ahead and speak. I am writing down the email addresses that are coming in so that I can give you links to all of the recordings. And we'll be doing our training on Fridays. We do try to keep them at an hour and leave some time for questions. So if there's no further questions, we'll go ahead and exit out of the meeting. But I wanted to tell you all how grateful I am that you attend and how much pleasure it gives me to be able to learn along with you and go over the contract with you. And as I say every week, always remember, answers to your questions are just a phone call away. Don't hesitate to call your broker or any of the management team. Help is here for you. Don't feel alone in any deal. We're here. Okay, so I thank you all very much and I wish you all a wonderful weekend. And thank you for attending. We'll send out a notice for the next training and give you the forms that we will be training on. Thank you so much.
Thank
See you,
you.
Mr.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice weekend, everybody.
Have a great day.
You too, Sylvia.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.
Ciao. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you.